Excellent. Well, thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me to speak on behalf of Overleaf. Unfortunately, I am not John Hammersley or John Lees-Miller, who would give a much more interesting talk, I should imagine, about Overleaf. So instead of me taking up too much of your time, I'm actually going to let them do some of the presentation. So we have a video, and I shall, technology allowing, I shall just hand over to the video for a few minutes.
I don't think we thought we'd necessarily grow this quickly when we first started. My name is John Hammersley. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Overleaf. I'm a mathematician and physicist by training. I really wanted to move into something which was more cutting edge and more kind of real world. I worked on the world's first driverless taxi, which is now in operation at Heathrow Airport. And it was actually there that I met John, my co-founder of Overleaf.
I'm John Lees-Miller. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Overleaf. I always liked sort of building things. You know, if you have a problem, I think you shouldn't just try to solve it once. You should always try to build a tool that'll help you solve it a lot of times. And sometimes you can even write a tool that helps lots of people solve things. So that's very much what happened with Overleaf. I was basically a PhD student at the time, and I was writing papers with collaborators both in my group and at labs in other places, and we just didn't have a good way of collaborating on the papers that we were writing. It was interesting to see for me, because I wrote this tool to help me do things in the lab. The first document on Overleaf that was written by someone else was nothing to do with science. It was actually a wedding invitation. So I sort of at that point realized that, hey, we've actually built something here that's not just for us. This is really something that a lot of people might find useful. I certainly didn't expect them to write wedding invitations, but hey, it may still be the only one.
It went on, it was on the internet, other people found it, and here we are today with 200,000 users. So one of the first functions we put in was a real-time collaborative editor. So it works in the same way as other collaborative editors, in that it merges all the changes seamlessly, so you can edit at the same time, and we handle all those conflicts. The second major feature was that it gives you an automatic preview of the typeset output, so you can see what your final document's going to look like alongside your input. So this has led on to some work we've done with publishers to make it possible for their editorial teams to access documents and leave feedback. We're also now talking with institutions about how this can help, for example, by providing their library services with more information on who's collaborating with who between departments and with other universities. So we're now working with Stanford University in the US. We're rolling this out across their campus, and we're getting a lot of great feedback on how this ties in with their system. So it's really building on the publisher and institutional links to make it accessible to more people. So we first met digital science through Figshare. So because Figshare was an online repository for data sources and a way of publishing your work online, they had an API that we could link into, and so one of our first partnerships was linking Overleaf with Figshare. John and I are both scientists, and so we understood the researcher and the author side of the problems that we were solving, but there were these other problems in open access in publishing, which digital science had the experience and knowledge and connections with, to help us grow faster and grow further. So we kind of really saw it as not only investment in financial terms, but also their experience in publishing and working with institutions on solving the bigger problems.
And that's one of the reasons that we've sort of taken on investment in digital science, is that in order to sell to larger people, you need to attain a certain scale, you need to attain a certain maturity, and I think digital science is helping us do that.
You have 8 teams plus the central digital science team who are all trying to make science better and science communication better. So it's great to be able to bounce ideas off people and just be in an office where that's the environment, rather than everyone turns up at 9 and leaves at 5.
I think one of the core things that digital science does well is that it always focuses on researchers and solving problems that people have. So whether that's a problem with getting your research out there, or for us a problem with sort of how do I write up my research, how do I collaborate with all of these people that I need to collaborate with, digital science just kind of understands that that's what we're focused on, is making researchers' lives better.
Excellent. I think you'll all agree that that the two Johns there said it better than I ever could. So I just want to put that into a little bit of context and just talk about the space that we think that Overleaf fits into and why we think it's important. So I don't want to labour this point because I think we're already fairly behind schedule, and it's already been said enough over the previous day or so, is that the way in which science is done, the way in which scientists behave, has changed dramatically as a result of the internet. Author lists are getting longer, people are collaborating across boundaries, both physical in terms of different countries, and also virtual in terms of subject areas, fields, disciplines, and that sort of thing. As Efka said, I am an example of a multidisciplinary researcher myself, having worked in both physics and neuroscience. One of the aspects, one of the reasons why this happens is that we see a shift. It's a little bit of an extension of the professionalization of research that Daniel talked about yesterday. But I think another aspect of that is the industrialization of it. If you look at the kind of left-hand side, I think this is how science used to be done, or how research used to be done. There was a single principal investigator who would write a grant that was project-oriented, would submit it to a funder, get some money, and then they would basically shepherd that research project all the way from doing the experiments, generating the data, publishing the article, and so on. Today, we have large, multidisciplinary, multi-lab, multinational projects like omics projects and some of the things that are going on, say, for example, at CERN and ITER in fusion research and the Human Genome Project, multiple different groups doing one small part of a much bigger project. You hear politicians talking about, particularly in America, talking about let's have an Apollo project to cure Alzheimer's, or an Apollo project to solve this technology or that technology. And so it's become much more collaborative. Here's some hard evidence to support that assertion. This was done by Jonathan Adams and the consulting division at Digital Science. The graphs here are a little bit complicated, but as you can see, what we have here is these kind of, beg your pardon, this kind of solid teal part is the number of papers, the number of articles that are being generated in both the United Kingdom and the United States, just as two examples. As you can see, they are escalating very quickly, as we all know, but the number of articles which we've termed here domestic papers, which are those with only authors from that one country, is not rising anywhere near as quickly. So that's some pretty solid evidence of that narrative, that we have a much more international collaborative environment today. The problem is that collaboration is, to say the least, a little bit frustrating in academia, particularly when it comes to the authorship portion of things. To put it quite simply, the kinds of technologies that were traditionally used for writing, things like Word and so forth, and LaTeX, were not designed with a multi-author environment in mind. You write the article, you write the document on your computer, and then you send it on to somebody else for review. There's no version control involved at all. And so that has become increasingly a challenge for researchers. There are, of course, technologies like Google Docs that have entered into this space, but they are not specifically designed for researchers and lacks a lot of the functionality that academics need for authoring papers. So enter Overleaf. As you saw from the video, and I won't go into too many of its features, Overleaf is a collaborative writing and publishing environment. It is built on LaTeX, which is a fantastic kind of underlying markup language. It's open source. It's been around since the 70s. It's very stable. It's very universal. It was invented by an academic. It's particularly suitable to this kind of writing. But we also have a rich text authorship environment so that people who don't know LaTeX can use it, and it automatically typesets and paginates in real time so that people can see what their finished article will look like. Gives the author a lot of control, or as much control as you like, over how the finished article looks. As you can see, it's very popular. In just 2.5 years, it has had this exponential growth curve, over 3 million documents and 250,000 authors. In fact, even Steph down here, one of the volunteers for APE, was using Overleaf to do some of her teaching work, actually, while I was queuing up to give my presentation. So I think that we were going to do some kind of voting at the end of this session and decide, which one was the best out of all of us. I think I already won. So I don't think we need to do that because we have somebody actually using my tool in the conference center right now. So why did digital science invest in it? What's exciting about this? You may have seen this wheel before, particularly in some of my presentations. I often bring this up. This is based on a quote that Annette Thomas said at Charleston, the Charleston Library Conference a few years ago, that the publisher's new role is to support researchers at every stage of the research cycle. And a lot of our tools are designed around that idea, and they're also designed to allow publishers to support them on that. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on Overleaf and just highlight 3 of the features which allow publishers to interact and engage with potential authors. The first one is templating. When we work with a publisher, they are able to submit LaTeX templates, which can then be applied to the author's work just with the single click of a button. It's very fast, very easy, and of course, one of the main advantages of that is that what is then submitted is essentially foolproof and associated with that template, follows that template very strictly, which reduces a lot of the kind of editorial burden on initial quality checks and that sort of thing. So as Todd was saying yesterday about the problem with formatting and things like that, this is a solution essentially to that issue. We also have a very simple and easy single-click push to submit. We have some of the publishers that we're working with. These are 2 Nature journals. We also have Faculty of 1000, PeerJ, and IEEE is not listed on here, but there and a number of other publishers that we can kind of click to submit straight away, taking a lot of that burden away. And hold on. There we go. And if you have a profile site or one of those kinds of technologies that are trying to encourage collaboration within a platform like a number of publishers are doing today, this is an example of how Overleaf is directly integrated into IEEE Collabratech so that it can directly integrate into the workflow. One of the ways to avoid profile fatigue, I personally believe, is to add something of real value to that collaborative environment so that people will use it as part of their natural workflow. So just to quickly finish off, because I know I'm overrunning just a little bit, I want to kind of take that wagon wheel, if you like, and kind of unwrap it and look at it from a publisher's perspective just very quickly. This is pre-digital publishing, essentially. And here we have, it starts at kind of the scientist gets an original idea, the researcher gets an original idea, does the research and writes the article. Here's the region which traditionally publishers got to interact with them. You first heard about them when they submitted the article, and the last time you saw them was the point of publication. There was really no way to engage with them before internet and computers beyond this kind of reasonably narrow scope of the research arc, if you like. Post-digitization, we were able to connect with researchers much better, particularly downstream. Things like counter and usage stats enabled us to figure out how many people were reading things, how many people were downloading things. But we also looked at things like sharing information, data publication, and alternative metrics in order to provide author services and reader services that went beyond the point of publication. We were essentially reaching further down that workflow. But up until now, we haven't really gone very much up that workflow. And several of Digital Science's products are looking into that space. Right down here, we have ways of looking at when researchers are thinking about ideas, when they're starting to collaborate, when they're starting to come up with, particularly Uber Research, when they're starting to submit grants and they're starting to get funding for research. That gives us a sense of what's on the horizon, emerging fields, emerging markets, either in terms of disciplines or geography again. And then Overleaf, critically, what that does is it allows you to have a point of engagement when that researcher is applying that template. That's a decision point for the researcher. It's the first point at which they think about, they decide that they are going to submit that article to your journal. And having them at that point is very powerful because it really lets you kind of move down this workflow and really expand your scope of engagement. All right, so thank you for listening, and apologies for overrunning by a couple of minutes.